Hi, everyone, and welcome to Women versus Everything, a podcast about women and their wider environments, how they have shaped the world around them, and how the world around them has shaped them. We are a women's history podcast, but today we're doing a special episode. Today we're going to do an interview with Hasti Yavari. She has the great pleasure of living in Cork with me. She's an activist, she's studying a PhD, and she's also a yoga instructor. And today we're going to talk about Iran and the story of women in Iran and how that fits with her activism. Would you like to say anything else about yourself, Hasti?
No, Grace, that's about it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No bother. This is also a special episode for a sad reason. You might hear that Jess isn't with us today. She's had a bit of health stuff going on and she's okay. But unfortunately, it meant she missed the time for this episode. But she will be back next week when we're going to continue the theme and do another special episode about women in Iran. So, Hasti, the first question we always ask people is mostly relating to early life and how the world around us shapes how we became and how we grew up and absorbed subconscious messages about what it means to be a woman. Where did you grow up?
So I'm originally from the Kurdish part of Iran. It's a city called Kermanshah. But we lived in Tehran. I grew up there till I was 16. So basically went to school and did all my education in Tehran. And then I moved out from the country. It's around 2009. There was another uprising, very similar to what happened now, a little bit more on the reform side. It was just a lot of turmoil and lots of horrific things happening, and I think that was a bit more of a catalyzer that my parents agreed that okay, we could sort of. I have a twin sister, so we both left Iran at that time, and I haven't been back since. I would go back for a visit, but never to live. So I haven't been back for more than, I guess, 2 weeks at a time.
And what was it like to grow up in Iran?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think, I suppose as a child, you just see what there is and you don't really have much to compare with, So I would go to a girls-only school, have to wear this very strange, now I see a strange kind of uniform that was very hard to move in or just play around with. So you have to wear something to cover your hair and then a long dress, even at the age of 7. And I should say in Islam, girls have to cover from 9 years onwards. And everybody in Iran has to do that. And I guess a lot of propaganda at school, lots of things that is just very unnecessary, And one thing that I always find amazing is that we go through all of that sort of abusive and traumatic education system. But at the end of the day, not me or any of my friends who been to those schools, we never subscribed to any of those ideas. We would have our own sort of parallel life, do our own parties underground, do not wear the scarf whenever we can, just talk about our ideas that were even sometimes scary to say out loud because it was just not so encouraged. Rather than a sort of complacent generation, we grew up to be a bit more critical and even see past everything that they would tell us. Sometimes, regardless of what we were being told, we would, first thing I think is to question it. And this is something that I'm very proud of myself and all of my classmates that I want to give a big shout out to.
Wow, so you grew up with the restriction being normalized, but also the rebellion was somewhat normalized?
I would say so. And you know what? A lot of people know about the recent revolution in Iran. They talk about the recent generation, the schoolgirls being so at the front line. And this is something that I find absolutely amazing because when I went to school, we didn't have our parents' support,
Okay.
A lot of things would happen that were unfair. But then, for example, my parents would say, okay, can you just do a bit better so they won't call us in, So they always want us to conform even on the outside. But we never did that to the next generation. We always supported them and we're like, no, that's not okay. This is our moral ground, And if somebody told you to do this, giving that sort of courage to the kids And I think that's the main reason that they are fearless and they are demanding their rights, even though they never had them.
So when your parents, the fear was still a big issue.
Oh my God, still they are so fearful. My parents, they are so not supportive of my activism, for example, and they are living in Iran. So I feel like it's, in their defense, their generation is a bit different. They went through 8 years of war, they went through a revolution, and I think they just have a lot less hope and a lot less faith in what is going to happen. So that's the main reason, I suppose.
Would your parents have been alive in the 1979 revolution?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Did they ever talk about what that was like, or what they missed from the time before that, or?
I think so. For example, whenever we look at my mom's childhood picture, it's a very big difference to my childhood picture whenever I was at school, or, you know, just the way they're dressing, the way you see the country, you know, at that time, which is for me, I always was very intrigued to see those pictures. It's something that I suppose feels very unnatural to think that we can go back so much in time, you know, naturally we think, okay, we're always progressing. So I think my childhood brain really didn't comprehend that, wow, we actually went back a lot, and why did that happen? You know, I was really just confused in all this transition.
What is your interpretation as a citizen of like why that happened, and what did happen in that 79 revolution?
My understanding is that people did want a more just future, a country that is based more on equality and those better human values. We had a king who was trying, but there was still a lot of shortcomings. And I think people were a bit triggered by saying that, okay, we have this monarchy and they live nicely, and at the same time there is poverty in like many other parts of Iran. So they did want something better, but what really happened that made us, basically left us in this situation we are now, is a series of historical events. The main one would be the war, 8 years of war, a lot of devastating economical and moral impacts. My father had to go to the war, for example, because the Iraqis were in his city at that time. I think he was just a teenager. So that's his whole youth that went 8 years of that into fighting for your country. So when the war happened, a lot of things were down prioritized, including women's rights. You know, it was just like, okay, now this is not the right time to discuss this. And very gradually we were stripped of our rights, you know. And then at the same time, lots of oppositions in Iran who helped the revolution happen. They were either massacred, they were executed, or they were forced to exile. So there was really no opposition, and there was one strong extremist Islamist group left who changed the law. They changed many things, and I think many people don't notice. They even changed the flag of the country, they changed the national anthem, they changed the calendar. Yeah. So it was basically like, okay, it's a new beginning, we're a different country, you know. And with that came new shape of the culture, or like the face of the country in terms of what women are wearing, what rights they have, and everything that entails.
Wow. Okay. And sometimes, you know, with a lot of other countries, we might have parents saying, "Oh, don't do this, don't do that," and it's out of shame. But in Iran, you grew up in a time where there was real consequences if you did get caught speaking these things. Did you have a sense of just hearing about that, or did you have a sense of like, no, that could actually happen to me, that my life is in danger?
Absolutely, Grace. And I think it's very hard to understand for somebody who hasn't experienced this, how traumatic and also shameful it is to live in fear and to have to sort of do things you don't personally believe in, you know. So I think all those years of fear does really take a toll on your mental health. And personally, for me, it was really just, at the end, I think you had to sort of decide if it's worth it, you know. Okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I know probably this is the outcome. Is it worth it or not? And very often we made the choice of, okay, it's worth it, you know, and hopefully we would sort of get away with it. It could be drinking alcohol secretly, or it could be have a party that is with mixed genders, stuff like that, that it's you could have severe consequences, but you still take that decision that no, this is fine, it's worth the risk. I have been many times walking in the streets in Tehran just being verbally abused, or people coming telling me, oh, what is this way you are dressing, because it was just not the way they liked it. And I think that's not everybody thinks that way, but when the society or the system, the legal system backs that thinking up, those people are more empowered. I think a good example is in the West, not everybody believes in same-sex marriage, but if the state allows it, even if you are a person who disagree with this a lot, as long as the state is not backing you up, you have much less power. But it's very opposite of that in Iran, that those minorities who have those extremist ideas, they are backed up, so they just have all the audacity in the world to do what they want. And we see it right now in the current situation in the streets of Iran.
Wow. Yeah, so I guess on top of the shame policing by, peers or within the community, but I think something that's really difficult for Westerners to understand is that, like in Iran, you also have morality police, or have you had experiences with them?
As I said, I haven't lived in Iran for my whole adult life. And every time I visited, I would see this evolution of morality police and the norms of the society. It can also be very indirect, that you're sitting in a cafe and somebody comes, or the owner of the cafe comes and tells you, can you please put back your scarf on, because they will come and check our CCTV and that would be problematic for our business. That's something that I don't want his business to be in danger, so I'll have to comply. It can be that you're sitting in a car and then afterwards, this has happened to me too, that you get the owner of the car gets an SMS that, oh, you have been spotted without observing the hijab, so you have to go there, pay this much, and you get like a formal warning. And if you don't pay that, they will actually confiscate your car. But the morality police is something that, like many other things, we learn to cope with. So if I've been going to areas that I knew they would be stationed, then I would just try to navigate my way around them. Or I would try to, while passing them, cover up a bit more and then do whatever after, Or I've had people telling me when I'm passing somewhere that, hey, be careful, there is morality police standing outside of that metro station, for example. So just sort of people watching for each other. But I understand this concept is very bizarre, but the main idea is that the current regime in Iran really wants to be Islamic State. They want to present this image, so they really have problems with being secular or having their own beliefs, and so that's their way of forcing people into it.
Okay, yeah. So it's another thing that you kind of became normalized from growing up in it, and but I love that story of like, also it calls the community to look out for each other, like, oh, they're just up there, and giving you warnings. That's
absolutely. It's lots of beautiful moments like this, in the midst of all the ugliness and all the pain and suffering.
Yeah. When you left, you said it was like 2009?
I left 2010 exactly, but the uprising was in 2009.
And with that uprising, did that change your daily life then?
So I was just finishing high school at that time, and I've always been very into politics. So I remember this movement was called Green Movement. So people were going to the streets, I think millions of us. But my parents didn't allow me to go, They were like, no, you have to study. And so what I was doing was, instead of being on the streets, just following what's happening. I was very scared for my own friends who were on the streets. And some of them were hurt, actually. They were hurt by batons or tear gas. It's something that even if you're not directly arrested by them, you would indirectly, just no matter what, be very much affected by it.
And was there a specific trigger to that 2009 uprising?
Yeah, so there, before the current revolution, as I like to call it, it's that people were really hoping for a reform. We were like, okay, but maybe there is that guy who seems a little bit more sound. Maybe he can help us. Maybe this candidate is less awful than the other, So it was always that decision between bad and worse. Green movement uprising was basically just people having voted in an election to a less extremist candidate, and there was just a very obvious false results of the election. So people were basically in the streets and talking that this is not okay, or where is my vote was the slogan at that time. And the candidate that I talked about, he is in house arrest now with his wife. It's been more than 10 years now. So that was our hope for reform, and I think it was very quashed at that time, that people were just like, okay, it seems like these guys cannot be helped, and there's no way we could find a peaceful way to have a more modern life, basically more democratic life.
Was there something about that revolution, did it help you feel like you were less alone? Because I know like a tactic that oppressors often use is like, well, this is what the majority wants, or this is what is actually good for you. Did revolution actually bring more of a sense of belonging to you, or was it just really frightening at the time?
Oh no, I always knew we are not alone and we are the majority. Okay. It was really like, okay, what is the best way about this? How can we sort of not let our youth die on the streets, and how can the doctors help? How can everybody help in their own way,
And where did you move to after that?
So I moved to Malaysia. I was there for 4 years. I was doing my undergrad there. And then I moved on to Sweden. I lived there for 7 years before moving to Ireland last year.
How did you find the move?
It was interesting, I was a young kid and suddenly left on my own in a different world, a colorful world, and just very different. I was speaking English, I was meeting all foreigners, I was seeing different food. Iran is a very close country in a sense of at least when I was growing up, there is not that many international restaurants, even in Tehran. So it was really like a whole different universe for me. And I think it took me all the years in Malaysia to really just sort of digest what's going on, and to be able to adapt and maybe also learn more about myself of, okay, if I don't have all those restrictions, what do I really like to do? And how do I want to define my path in future?
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah. When did you stop wearing a headscarf straight away?
That's a very good question. I mentioned I have a twin sister that we moved together to Malaysia, and I have a bit of a strict family, but when we were sitting on that plane to Malaysia, it was our first plane outside of the country, and we had this conversation that what do we do with the scarves? It wasn't very clear. I think for many families it's very clear that of course you don't wear it, but for us it wasn't. But then together we decided to remove our scarves. My parents were with us on the plane to help us with the move, and I remember the look in their eyes, like both my parents, but then they didn't say anything, and that's when it started basically. So for me it was that sort of abrupt change at that time.
Wow, brilliant. And have you guys stayed with that, or do you have a relationship to wearing a headscarf now, or?
Oh, absolutely not.
No. Okay.
It's more like a statement. There is no chance I would put back that scarf.
Okay. Fair. And how is it then even like being outside in colorful clothes, and like what did you learn about yourself? What did you find your likes and dislikes were now that you had freedom to kind of experiment?
I think it was really a long journey, and I don't know, learning about what's my style, like how do I want to dress, and also just being independent as an adult, having money to buy your own clothes. All of that, I think, is not just an Iranian thing, but also every human's thing when you are being suddenly an adult. So it took me a while, but I think it was more than anything also that kind of transition from being solely an Iranian girl into a girl that is more living in an international society. All of my friends, maybe 99%, were not from Iran, and sort of also coping with that world that was really different from what I was used to, and wanting to fit in and wanting to belong, but at the same time knowing that my friends probably would not really have any understanding of what my past was like.
Yeah. What do you find are the most common misconceptions people have about Iran or Iranian women?
Misconception. I think people, not anymore, but I think some people would think that we're not as strong as we are, but Iranian women are amazing, and I can't say it enough. We are the majority in the universities in Iran, and 70% of the STEM fields is actually women studying, even though we have all these crazy amounts of limitation that is enforced by the legislation system. We still find our ways around it.
Oh my God.
I think a lot of people would sort of think, this is not something I talk very openly with my friends about, or used to talk about. Now I'm all out about it. But for me, it was really just not giving that credit to my friend or the person I'm talking to, that they would really understand, and because very often I was met with a bit more condescending or patronizing comments of, oh, we have to count our blessings here. Or sometimes people say, oh, you're lucky to not be in Iran anymore. All these things that would just sort of push me, and I think many other Iranians, to talk less and less about what's going on in Iran. And at the end, I think that was not a great trajectory, because I was already not believing that the person is going to understand, so I wasn't giving them enough credit in that sense. So it's something I'm really actively working on, to give credit to my audience that no, you can understand, even if it's difficult to digest, it's not impossible, and it's just my story, and you know me, therefore you have to make that extra effort to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think doing research for the episode we were going to do, that was just looking at the Wikipedia of famous Iranian women. There was lists of these accolades and first women in the world to do this, and awards in like everything, filmmaking to maths to, and I think white people, Westerners, do have this misconception that Iran is, it's that infantilization that, maybe you can't wear a headscarf and be this very empowered, educated person, which is now ridiculous. But if I think of myself 5-10 years ago, I probably would have thought the same, And that's also that tension between a government being able to separate morality and education. So it's like the women are empowered in some ways where maybe it just benefits the government to have the jobs in the centres of excellence, but also disempowered in other ways. And that's very splitting. Like how can someone do that, be both,
I think a very prominent strategy that this current regime took from the beginning was that if you're not happy, you should leave the country. And I mean, they were very good at it. Iran is 18 million population inside Iran, but 4 million are living outside. And because we have such a poor passport, a very common way for us to be able to travel is through universities or just getting student visas. That's what I did, for example, when I was 17. And I think we just as a society always value education. It's always these jokes that if you're Iranian, you all either have to be a doctor or lawyer, like that kind of Middle Eastern mentality. So I think it's a bit of that. But then once we didn't have those limitations, it's because you are just so motivated to prove yourself, then it's just a different kind of effort that you put. I think that's the main reason I personally started studying electronics. So I did electronics for my bachelor's. I think I just wanted to prove to others that girls can do hard things, and basically set on this path that I'm on right now, doing a PhD in medical devices. But basically because the young me wanted to prove, that no, I'm smart, I can do hard things in your face.
Amazing. And do you want to speak about the current revolution that is happening?
So earlier in September, Mahsa Amini, she is visiting Tehran from a Kurdish part of Iran where she's from. She's visiting Tehran with her brother, actually, and they get stopped by this morality police. And they want to take her away. So the brother is like, no, we are just guests and we didn't know. But they say, no, don't worry, this is just like a 1 hour education kind of session, which is their standard procedure. You go there, they listen to some talks, sign something, somebody brings you proper clothing, and then they let you go. But according to many people who were arrested at the same time, she gets beaten up by this police and she collapses in police custody and goes to a coma afterwards. So on 16th of September, she passes away. And I think that was really that straw that broke the camel's back, and the nerve was pushed in every Iranian's mind that, okay, this is not okay and enough is enough. I think there was this collective realization that no matter if you're a woman, no matter if you're Kurdish, no matter if you are any kind of classification of the society, that you were just not safe under this regime, because Mahsa Amini could be anyone's daughter, anyone's sister. So people were just really enraged, and they came to the streets to protest that. It started from her own funeral in Saqas, her city. For the first time, women took off their scarves, they burned the scarves, and they chanted Jen Jan Azadi, which is a Kurdish slogan that was actually used in Iraq when it passed by the Kurdish women there, who were also very icons fighting ISIS, and very strong women there as well. So I think that was really the spark, and then just small flames that could not be suffocated, and then just turned into bigger and bigger parts all the way around. Is something that never happened before, that every city in Iran would just unite every kind of different demographics, different ethnicities, different social classes, different age groups, very unique movement we're seeing in Iran. And I think it's just very special days to witness and to be alive at that time.
And how are you finding doing activist work from another country?
That's a good question. Some people naturally, they want to be in the spotlight, but it was never really me. So as you mentioned, I teach yoga, and I'm also an engineer. I'm right now doing a PhD. So I always thought, okay, this is not my field. And I was doing a lot of volunteer work, but never fully activism. But I think it was just sort of the responsibility that was given to me because I'm an Iranian woman, and because I can't speak of what's happening more from a safe place, I know that I can just speak up without having to fear my life. And so I think this was something that very organically happened. I had an Instagram page that I mostly use for yoga, very reluctantly, because many other yoga teachers, I always wanted to be offline and just have this more quiet life. But I'm so glad for this page, because then suddenly I had a small platform that I could talk to the people, and I could just tell the world about the atrocities that are happening in Iran.
And how are you finding the Irish people's reception to it?
It's been very supportive. I've been speaking in different protests, different seminars, contexts. Yesterday I was in the Rosa March for Savita's 10th death anniversary, and personally I find it very supportive and beautiful in a sense, very heartwarming. Yesterday we were walking with the Rosa and other groups for Savita's march, and there was the Woman Life Freedom chant, and my heart was just so warm, and it's something that I think is easy to forget, how powerful it is to show support, solidarity, that power of, okay, you're not alone and I feel your pain, even though I didn't grow up there, even though my family is not there, my friends are not there, but as a human I can relate to this pain, and I stand in solidarity with you. So it was just so heartwarming and beautiful moment to witness for me personally in Ireland.
Can you tell me about your journey with yoga, actually? When did you first start finding yoga as a source of support and resilience?
Yeah, so I was in Sweden, and I was going through a particularly rough patch of my life, and I thought, okay, I need to do something for myself, and I signed up hot yoga studio in Malmö, where I was living. They had this intro period that meant you could do as many classes as you want in 1 month. So I was doing 2 classes every day, and I was at the same time working full-time in another city. So basically my whole life was this, and just after a few months I decided I need to teach this because it did so much for me. I did different trainings, and I think this has been one of the most defining decisions I made in my life to take on this path.
And how is your relationship with like religion and faith now, given your journey?
I've never been religious actually, so it's not something I think much about. Couldn't relate to it ever, not just Islam but any other religion. Obviously, as a yoga teacher, I study Buddhism a lot, Hinduism a lot, just to learn about the philosophy. But this is not something that I would, in general, I would even talk about in my classes, but not something I would advocate or fully practice myself.
So, if people want to support Iranian women, what's the best resources or what's the best way they can do that?
There are many ways, I think, starting from just signing petitions, staying updated, and involved. Very often, I think, when we're talking about Middle East, it's just natural to feel a little bit distant and hard to relate to. Also, there is this other psychological phenomenon called psychic numbing, that when we are just confronted with something that is overwhelmingly dark, then we just start to dissociate with it, or just like feeling the indifference. Very similar to the mass shootings or the Hazara genocide in Afghanistan. But I really want to encourage people to just do something, even no matter how small. It can be just reading one more news. It can be reaching out to your Iranian friend and just asking them how they're doing. I think that goes a long way in itself. The rest is up to every individual. If you are a journalist, if you are a politician, if you are a musician, if you are an athlete, I think everybody can do something in their own level, and that is what we have been talking about as much as I can, that it doesn't matter if you are a full-on politician, there is something you can do. There is a beautiful slogan that people are using in Iran that I shared yesterday in my speech in Dublin. It says, wherever you are, take one step further. I think that really encompasses so beautifully that if you're not doing nothing, maybe do something small. And if you're doing something small, maybe do 2 small things, and just sort of, so all of us take that one step further, it would make a big collective impact.
Beautiful. Is your sister also like living somewhere else as well?
She's in Canada now. Right now is in California, but she's based in Toronto.
Yeah, and how are your parents finding living in Iran with what's going on there?
Recently, we haven't really had the chance to talk much, to be honest, because of the internet situation. But more or less, it's like their whole life is there, their career, their friends, and So I think they are they will be there for as long as I see, unless something unusual happens.
And how are they do they know about your activism?
They don't know much, no. I don't think they would be very supportive, because I don't know, they have this argument that it's not worth the risk, and they are also I think the main reason is that I probably won't be able to go back to Iran under this regime, because of speaking against them more openly, and so they're a bit upset with that in their mind I'm sacrificing our relationship, and being able to see them. So that's that. But I think, that's not a big price to pay compared to whatever everybody else is doing.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about?
I think we talked about the main points, Grace. Yeah. If you ever have any other questions, I'm happy to jump in. I'm more than happy to talk about Iran. My sister's back there. They're doing an amazing job, and I think they deserve to be heard louder and clearer. So thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about it.
No problem. So usually when we interview people, we do have some rapid fire questions, but I can't actually find them.
That
They're
sounds
fun.
like trouble.
It's usually Jess who does that bit, so I'm just a bit like, oh, I don't know where that bit's gone.
Maybe this is a sign, Grace, that...
Yeah, I mean, we could leave it off. I'm sure people will understand that. Yeah, Jess wasn't here this time as well.
Helping me.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jess and universe. No, I'm joking. If you find it, why not?
Well, I know if one of the questions was, imagine if we were doing this interview face to face in a coffee shop, what would you order?
Oh, I'm obsessed with tea, so I'll try to see what is their fanciest tea, and I'll just get that.
Lovely. Have you ever gone to
I
Osho
have,
in
yes.
Cork? Oh, I love that place.
I loved, by the way, the little disclaimer you guys do at the beginning of episodes that, oh, if there's something wrong, tell us. If there, I think that's beautiful. It's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always that thing where like I don't want to not talk about another culture out of anxiety, but I also know if I do, I'm going to get something wrong.
I know.
So this is the first episode where we're interviewing someone first and then
Right.
talking about the wider issue.
Well done. You know what? Like, I really understand the struggle of being like, this is not my place, or maybe, but it takes courage and it takes confidence. So really appreciate that. And I mean, we need that, I think it's like a responsibility that if to take on, and be others' voices if you have this platform, and also to just be more relatable, So I think that's very admirable.
It's been an amazing journey. I've learned so much, Yeah.
I mean, in yoga, we say this all the time, that inaction is an action. So you might add, if you don't do nothing, it doesn't mean that you haven't done something. It's like you did that nothingness, and which is not a good action. So well done for not doing inaction.
Thank you. Well, thanks. I've learned so much talking to you.
Thank you, Grace.
And thank you for being so honest and so vulnerable.
No, of course. Love to, speaking heart to heart always helps, And I think what comes from the heart sits in the heart. So hopefully that's the case.
Absolutely.